So, good evening and welcome, comrades. It's the first meeting of 2026, hosted by Talking About Socialism from a Marxist Point of View. My name's Ed Potts. I'm going to be chairing the discussion today. Few bits of info for you before we get started properly. This meeting, as you'll have heard, is being recorded, and that means it's available to watch later on our YouTube channels and on Facebook. We would encourage you, obviously, to do that and to share it with anybody afterwards who you think may be interested in it. There are a couple of new faces tonight. Welcome to you. It's good to have you here. We hold these discussion meetings at least once a month. And what we aim for is frank and open debate in a welcoming and comradely atmosphere. And most of all, we welcome people saying what they think about things because that's how we move our cause forward and clarify our ideas. We aim to give everybody time to say what they think and expand and ask questions and offer their thoughts. And so, if this is your first meeting, welcome. And your views and your contributions are very welcome also. So the topic for tonight's discussion, which is going to be introduced by Nick Wrack, will be familiar to most of you, I think, is the CEC elections, Central Executive Committee elections for your party. And the question posed for the meeting is whether the CEC elections can save your party. It seems that we are a long way away from the initial enthusiasm that met the initial call for the party, with 800,000 people signing up and registering their interest initially. It seems we're a long way off from those numbers now, and active involvement is substantially less. But could it perhaps recover? Will the election of a new executive give the party direction in one way or another and allow a recovery and allow a growth of support once again? To examine these and other questions, Nick is going to give an introduction of perhaps 15, 20 minutes, however long Nick needs, really. And then there will be plenty of time for contributions from the floor. What we try to do is put a bit of a limit on contributions, and that's purely for the purpose of making sure that everybody gets a chance to come in and have their say. I don't think that we'll be overly pressed for time this evening, given the numbers. But if I do catch anyone going on too long, I might just gently intervene and ask you to wrap it up so that we can call others in. So please don't be offended if that happens to you. In terms of coming in to make a contribution from the floor, I'm going to ask that you use your Zoom virtual hand, which you can access from the bottom of the screen if possible. That makes it much easier for me as chair to know who wants to come in and speak or ask a question or offer their thoughts. If, however, you can't do that for any reason, then raise your physical hand on camera and I'll make my best efforts to notice you and add you to the list of speakers. The meeting's due to close at 9 p.m. We will close promptly. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Nick to give us an introduction to the topic. So go ahead, Nick.
Thanks very much, Ed. And thanks everybody for coming to this first meeting of 2026. I think it's worthwhile just saying a sentence or two about talking about socialism from a Marxist point of view. It is what it says on the title. We're a small group of Marxists, and we want to discuss Marxist ideas and how we build support and growth of Marxist ideas within the British and international labour movement, and finding allies who we can discuss and work with. So if you're new to the talks, welcome. I hope you find the discussion interesting, thoughtful at least. We have on our website a statement of what talking about socialism has as its sort of guiding principles. And you'll see if you read that, and those of you who have participated in these meetings before will know that our aim, our goal is to help create a mass socialist or communist party based on the working class that has a clear program to abolish capitalism not to manage it, and to inaugurate a new society that is completely democratic and is based on the common ownership of the means of production. That is the land, the seas, the rivers, the waters, the minerals in the land and the seas, the factories, the technology, the science, and so on, run not for profit, but to meet the needs of all. And that's what we want to see. And we have never favored the idea of launching a social democratic party or a Labour Party Mark II. That's not been our aim. But of course, we're small and we're not in control of events. And we have to respond and react and intervene and engage with what is in front of us. And what we saw last year, very, very, very belatedly, was this initiative for your party. And if you think about the points that I've just mentioned, the lateness, the belated nature of that call, it tells you something about the project, and it tells you something about one of the key leaders, and that is Jeremy Corbyn. Because if you think about it, Jeremy Corbyn resigned as leader of the Labour Party, I think, at the end of 2019. So 6 years went by in which he delayed and dilly-dallied and launched the Peace and Justice project and so on, but not a political party project. And then there was discussions and initiatives, and they got together. And then Zara Sultana, because she'd lost the wit, was a sort of a prompter to get the party pushed. I've got criticisms of Sultana's launching of the separate portal, but that's perhaps something that people can comment about. But the first thing I suppose to note is that the idea of a new party was not something, in my opinion at least, that Jeremy Corbyn wanted. And I think that that's been reflected in the delay in taking the initiative, and then in the way that it's been built from the top, or not being built is the point. Again, we look at or remind ourselves of the political events, the rightward shift of Labour even further to the right under Starmer, the genocide in Gaza, the move to world war, the threat of climate catastrophe. All of these, the products of a capitalist system that's based on profit and nothing else. And so there's been more and more of a clamour for something new to emerge. And of course, there's lots of discussion and debate about what that should be. Should it simply be Corbynism Mark III, so 2017 manifesto, 2019 manifesto, some form of new invigorated Corbynism? What we've got really is perhaps not even warmed up Corbynism, in my opinion. And we, in talking about socialism, are very clear that social democratic policies, the idea of managing capitalism in a fairer way, is an impossibility. You can't manage the profit system in the interest of the people who make the profit. That's the working class. They're exploited to make that profit. If you try to manage it, you will end up doing what the owners of the means of production want you to do. And that's what we've seen throughout history. Every time a social democratic government has come into power, they've ended up doing what the bosses, the owners of production want. When it was launched, as Ed's referred to, there was initially hundreds of thousands of people, and it went up and went up and went up until at one stage we were told that it was 800,000 people wanted or had signed up to participate in this new party. Now that's a phenomenal number of people, almost a million. And in my opinion, had this been dealt with and managed differently, and therefore better, it's quite possible that we could have kept all of those 800,000 in your party and got more. We perhaps could have been pushing onto 1 million of enthusiastic people who wanted to build the party in a vibrant way in which the culture of the party, had it been encouraged and developed, would have been lively, would have been active, it would have been campaigning, and there would have been a clash of ideas, there would have been interest. Well, what do we mean by socialism? What's wrong with what happened in the communist, so-called communist countries? What went wrong there? What do we think of Stalinism? How do we get from capitalism to communism? All of these ideas would have come up, and we wanted to participate in that and to help to build this party, even though it wasn't the party that we would have initiated. And we still think that there's a need for clarity on the type of program that your party should adopt, and that's raised starkly in the question of these CEC elections. But it's necessary to just go back over a little bit of the history and the way that it's been done. At one stage last year, Jeremy Corbyn had to apologise for the failures in building your party, and the failures are many. In my opinion, they are not accidental. If you think about the way that your party has been built, or being obstructed from being built, what we have is an anonymous central organizing team. We don't know who they are. We've got some ideas of some of the names. Carrie Murphy is one that's prominently mentioned, former, important aide to Corbyn when he was Labour Party leader and so on. But for the most part, we don't know who is organising your party. There's no transparency. We don't see the financial accounts. And most importantly, we don't see the data. We don't know who the members are. So that 800,000, because of the delay and the dilly-dallying, it went down and went down and went down. And we then had Zara Sultana launching her portal. And that got a few tens of thousands of people who joined. And then there were threats of legal action and reporting to the data commissioner and so on. Completely out of order, in my opinion, that battle emerged and developed in that way, and that there were threats of snitching on what were supposed to be allies. Completely unacceptable. But there we are, and you could see the energy disappearing around your party. And certainly where I'm based in Withington constituency in Manchester, you could see that the enthusiasm that there had been was disappearing. People were saying, well, what is it? What's happening? At the same time, over the last several months with the election of Zach Polanski, we've seen a more energized Green Party leadership. I have no real truck or time for the Green Party. It's not a working class party. It's not a socialist party. And I think those socialists that are looking towards it and joining it and so on are making a mistake. But all of that combined to undermine your party. And what we've got now I think a video in November, or I think it was December the 5th. You'll find it online. Jeremy Corbyn said we've got 50,000 members in your party. So we've gone from 800,000 to 50,000. But if you look at the last vote on the Your Party website, which was the vote to change the constitutional arrangement that had been voted on at the conference about the National Executive Committee, or the CEC, how many places were on it. Only just over 10,000 people voted in that, out of what's called a fully paid, active, verified membership of 25,000. So what we've got at most is 25,000 members. And 10,000 who get involved in elections. That's about par for the course at the conference and since. And probably what we'll see in the CEC elections is something similar, perhaps slightly higher. But obviously, it's a far cry from the 800,000 or even the 500,000 if you want. It's a tenth or an eighth of what we could have got. It's really poor. And one of the things that I hear a lot from supporters of Jeremy Corbyn, and Jeremy Corbyn has said it himself in his what I thought was quite forlorn apology, was, oh, we don't have a blueprint. We don't have a handbook for how to build a party. Well, frankly, that's nonsense. It's just an unacceptable position to adopt. 800,000 people, what do? You sign them up. You give the data to local organisers. You call meetings. It would have been more than 1,000 people in every constituency in the UK on average. And it might have been messy, no doubt would have been messy, but we'd have been getting the money. The people would have been enthused. They'd have sorted things out in terms of, organising committees, in getting people to be chair, secretary, treasurer, working out what the campaigns that they wanted to get involved in. And it would have been, from the off, a bit of a messy, but a mass party with all sorts of ideas being exchanged and so on. Now, what happened? The data was hidden. It was not given to the organisers on the ground. So I'm just going to give a brief example from my own experience in Withington. Now, at one stage, some of you might know this, at one stage, I think at the end of November or beginning of December, for a very short period, the membership details were public on the Your Party website. And we were able to see that in Withington constituency at that stage, we had 287 members. They weren't full details. Sometimes people gave their first and last name. Sometimes they just gave a nickname or a first name and so on. But we would have had a good idea of who those 287 people were. However, it disappeared. And we were left with simply a WhatsApp chat that had 103 people on it. And we wanted to form a branch, and we wanted to form a branch formally within the Constitution. And we set ourselves a target of getting the 20% necessary. And we had a meeting last Friday on the 23rd. And we spent a huge amount of time, a small team of people, trying to work out who the members were. And it turned out that of the 103 on the WhatsApp group, only something like 46 or so were actually members. And at the meeting on Friday, we got 45 members and 2 non-members to the meeting. And although we weren't able to form a constitutionally recognised branch because we didn't have the 20% and we didn't have a CEC member present because there is no CEC, we did take a vote and we formed a branch. But it was a bit of a half step, really, because it's not a proper branch under the Constitution. And instead of having a branch of 1,000 or 500, or even 287, which is what we're told we've got a branch that met with less than 50 or fewer than 50. And that's despite us writing to the head office on no fewer than 10 occasions saying, can you provide us with the data? We got no answers. And we tried to publicize the meeting and get the national headquarters to send out, if not through us, but to send out themselves to the 287 people, the details of this inaugural meeting. And they just didn't answer and they didn't do it. And it's still up there on my private section of the website saying waiting to be authorized. So what's happened is that all over the country, proto branches have been formed with people determined to try to make this project work despite the impediments that have been put by the people that are supposed to be building it. And I put most of the blame for that on Jeremy Corbyn and the people around him and the people that are advising him and the people who are trying to implement what is clearly his strategy. Now, Jeremy Corbyn's politics are mildly social democratic. They don't even meet, in my opinion, the radical nature of the Bennite left or the alternative economic strategy of the 1970s and 1980s. And that is married clearly with a reluctance to allow an active democratic membership to determine what they want to do. And because it might be at odds with what Jeremy or other people want to do. And at the conference, we had a bit of a taste of this, and certain decisions were taken which Jeremy Corbyn clearly didn't like. And he's already said that he wants to overturn the collective leadership that was adopted and presumably go back to a single leader being Jeremy. And his aides are clearly doing what they can to push that through at the moment. So we don't have formally recognized branches. The branches that have been set up don't have any money. The branches that have been set up don't have the data with which to build. So we're stymied. There are May elections to the council, to the various local councils in May, but there will be no candidates for your party. So we'll have launched a party. One of the most important things for it to be doing, obviously not the only thing, but is to contest elections and to present the socialist alternative that it decides it wants to support and push. But it's not going to happen. What's been said, again, from a leadership that probably no longer has authority to say it, but that they are going to look at independent candidates and decide which ones to support. And that's really a model of what I think will happen if Corbyn's slate wins. It will basically be self-appointed people who want to stand for office, whether at local council elections or in Parliament, sanctioned by Jeremy's team, people who will agree with Jeremy and will not want the socialist, the really socialist left, the Marxist left, to have a say. And the impediments that have been put in building the party, in my opinion, are not accidental. And they're not just, oh, we don't have a handbook. They're deliberate. And they flow from the political outlook of Jeremy Corbyn and his team. And we should remind ourselves that in 2018, when the Labour Party conference was did meet, and it was due to discuss open selection, or what used to be called mandatory reselection, that Jeremy and his ally, Len McCluskey, the then leader of Unite, ensured that open selection was defeated. And so mandatory reselection or open selection didn't become the rule in the Labour Party under Corbyn. I can speak from personal experience. In 2017, I was elected to the first democratically elected National Committee of Momentum. I was then based in London. And we had a National Executive Committee at the beginning, early January, I think it was, 2017. And we had quite a success from the left. We won a few votes. And that week, the following week, John Landsman, again, with the sanction of Jeremy Corbyn, basically overturned and threw out that National Executive Committee and introduced a new way of determining how momentum would work. So the idea that Jeremy wants an active, thoughtful membership is not borne out by what's happened in your party, and it's not borne out by his own history, with those two examples that I've given. Now, people can comment on what they think the situation is in your party. I look forward to hearing what people say. In my opinion, your party is on life support machine. and it's not clear which way it's going to go. And these CEC elections, it's not necessarily the case that it's going to make a big difference. Again, I'd be interested to hear what you all think. But there clearly has emerged two different strands, clearly different strands, and a lot of independence in between, and one or two smaller lists. But there's the grassroots left, which has come together very quickly. And I think I haven't followed all the detail. I'm not clear exactly who has at each stage been involved. But it's put together what is quite a good program. There's some things in it that I wonder about, but it's a good political program, and that's the starting point for us. What are the politics? So the politics of the grassroots left list is clearly stating the need to abolish capitalism and inaugurate socialism. I have some quibbles and differences with some of the formulations, but that's for perhaps another day or later in the discussion. And most important, well, very importantly, because I don't think we can't just concentrate on democracy. We have to do politics and democracy. But they clearly want transparency and openness, which we don't have now. There's none of that. They want branches with the data so that they can build locally, and that's absolutely key. They want finances for the branches, and that's absolutely key. And therefore, looking at the options, I personally will be voting for grassroots left candidates. That's not to say that there aren't other good candidates, but I haven't been able to study at the moment everybody that's standing in my region, which is in the northwest. Belatedly again, or as a response to the grassroots left, Jeremy Corbyn has initiated another slate, an alternative slate, which is clearly backing his project, his model, and it's called The Many. And I encourage people to go to the two different websites or the different places on Facebook and so on, where you can find these two different lists and what they stand for. And you have to say, whatever differences I might have with the grassroots left, it's clear and it's explicit on what it wants to do and what it stands for and some of the democratic steps that it would initiate. Whereas the many is frankly is just a list of platitudes. It's a list of motherhood and apple pie. It's vacuous. It's, we want things to be better, to be fairer, build in the communities without saying how it's going to be done. It doesn't attack capitalism as our enemy. It doesn't attack the capitalist class as our class enemy that needs to be defeated. If I had to put money on it at the moment, I would probably guess that Jeremy Corbyn will have the bulk of the support in the existing membership. If it wins, I don't have much hope at this moment for the future of your party, because it will continue to be built. It will be unaccountable. The membership will be excluded. Now, when your party was formed, most of the organized socialist and Marxist left that had been in the Labour Party or had been outside of the Labour Party saw it rightly as a vehicle that they should join. The Revolutionary Communist Party dabbled with it and then took a decision not to get involved. The Morning Star Communist Party never got involved, but does comment on it. But the Socialist Party, the Socialist Workers' Party, RS21, Socialist Alternative, and the Communist Party of Great Britain and a few other organisations did get involved. We've then had this outrageous position where people who have presented themselves as candidates for the Central Executive Committee elections, which are due to, well, the candidates are now have been nominated and they're getting endorsements. That's another matter. You need 75 endorsements, which is clearly a deliberate attempt to prevent a plethora of candidates. There should be very little to prevent people standing. I mean, why not a nominator and a seconder, and people can make up their own minds. But anyway, you need 75 endorsements. Some people have put themselves forward and have found that they've been excluded because they are members, it's said, of other parties. And this unaccountable, unnamed, not transparent headquarters has said that there's a rule against dual membership. Well, there isn't. The conference voted in favour of dual membership unless the CEC ruled against it, not the other way around. And so people that were in the Socialist Party, like Dave Nellis, the former Labour MP, who wanted to stand, should have been allowed to stand, and he's been excluded and prevented from standing. I think Ian, if I'm not mistaken, Ian Drummond, who's in this call, has also, I don't know what the latest is, Ian, I hope you tell us, but I think you were prevented from standing. Ian Spencer, who had been a member of the Communist Party of Great Britain, was excluded, and now he's been reinstated because he's demonstrated that he was no longer a member of the CPGB. I mean, personally, in parentheses, I'll say, I don't see why Ian left. He should have argued his case for being both a member of your party and the CPGB and defending that position. But it's outrageous that people who have joined your party, wanted to build your party, and were prepared to stand for positions on the Central Executive Committee have been outlawed, essentially expelled, can't be a member, can't stand for office. It's going to be interesting. I don't know what the answer is, what those parties do. Will the Socialist Party withdraw? Will the SWP withdraw? Will other parties withdraw? And that would be a shame. It would be a disappointment, because what we have in those organizations are people with a track record, campaigners, thinking Marxists, socialists, communists, people with experience. And we need people like that to be the glue to build a party like your party, and to fight to make your party a truly democratic and socialist party, socialist in the way that we talk about it, one that wants to abolish capitalism.
You're right to wrap up now, Nick.
I'm going to wrap. Yeah, there's lots of other things that I haven't been able to touch on in terms of the failures over the last 6 months, and where we're going to go over the next few weeks and months. I hope that I've prompted a few thoughts, and I look forward to hearing what people say. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nick. As you say, there's a lot of ground to cover there, and there's lots of different things going on in different areas. And I'm glad that clearly on this call we've got people from various parts of the country represented, and I'm sure that people can give us an idea of what's been happening or not happening in their parts of the country, and what they think about the way forward. And so with that, I'm going to ask for people to raise hands for contributions from the floor. Ian, I can see already you put something in the chat, so I'll call you in just a moment. But if I can have one or two other comrades just indicate that they'd like to come in, that would be fantastic. If not, then right. So great. So I've got Ian first of all, and then it will be Pete Bloomer. I'll give you a few minutes. I won't be too strict with timing, but yeah, there you go. Ian, go ahead.
Thanks. I wasn't sure if I'd come in actually, but since Nick mentioned my case near the end, I put the first half of it in the chat, and I thought I might as well just update comrades who are interested in the meeting since I'm here. That I, as I said in the chat, I think what happened because I'm not a member of any other party other than YP, is that I've said in my 300-word statement that I'm in the Campaign for Mass Workers Party, and also a signature to the Platform for a Democratic Party that was put out near the start of all this process. And it was a way of saying, I think these democratic sides of your party have been vindicated. That the and the CMWP, for people who don't know it, was involved in the collective talks, always pushing for Corbyn to move faster, for things to be set up faster more generally. In that part of Nick's very good overview of the situation since the beginning. So it was a well-kent face. So there were I heard something like 600 applications being done in, I think, a very rushed way. So even with good faith, mistakes could be made because the Sortition Oversight Committee, I think, only came in like a week or so before it started, having been said it would be set up straight after the conference. I mentioned these groups, certainly not parties, even by the most restrictive of the various definitions that have been debated. Does it have to be with the Electoral Commission and standing against us, or do the SWP, who don't do those things, count as well? And so I think it triggered either an AI response, like back in the day with the Labour Party, expelled by algorithm stories, or a Pavlovian response to the word party. And I was reinstated just over a day later. It was on the Monday night that I saw that I was banned for dual membership, so-called. And on Wednesday morning, I didn't see it immediately because it was at 6:15 in the morning. So that does sort of back up the idea that some of this was because it was once again being left so much to the last minute, as opposed to necessarily a conspiracy of any kind. I was reinstated. On Tuesday was an interesting day last week. So much solidarity from so many quarters in the party, even that I'm very grateful for. Just to tell comrades, I'm standing for the Scottish seat. And there is only one Scottish seat, and that's one of the reasons I'm standing, because I think that's wrong. When they did that referendum over Christmas, and again, a terrible time to tell people about a vote in the party on the night of the 23rd of December, closing 1 week later. I actually did vote yes in the end, because 16 divided by 9 plus gender balance would always have been a nightmare. So it made sense in terms of England, but they left Scotland and Wales out of it for some reason. So we've still got one each, which is precisely half of each English region. So England's population obviously being bigger anyway, being a lopsided issue in British politics anyway, now is actually overrepresented in this central organisation for the first time that I could think of. So I think Scotland and Wales have to be levelled up to at least 2 on the CEC. If the differentness of being nations as opposed to regions is to be respected, and I think that should be, and we've got autonomy, but that shouldn't be a quid pro quo. Then it should be that we get even more representation, but certainly not less. And there are people in Scotland arguing for having a totally separate your party, like the Scottish Greens. I think that would be a mistake, but things like this are almost pushing us out the door. Though on the Scottish Greens, I just saw last night or yesterday afternoon in the National that they're actually going to go back in with Zach Polanski's lot, which is probably a good tactical decision for them, since he's making a lot of hay and they to be to put it mildly, arrant, having been in government with the SNP at Holyrood for a time. I'm campaigning for diluting my own role, as I say in my CEC statement. I'm also campaigning on getting the data up to Scotland. I think setting up something totally separate before we've even seen or been able to engage with not just the paid up members here, which I don't think we're even able to fully do yet, but all the people in Scotland. At one point, above average of the sign-ups across the country was in Scotland. And we should be engaging with those sign-ups, see what they want. Do they want a totally separate Scottish party? I have my doubts, not just because the Greens themselves have given up on it now, but because there are totally separate Scottish parties on the left available. And the initial lightning rod of Jeremy Corbyn finally moving Zara Sultana, an upcoming young leader who's the first politician of that rank in setting up a party to actually come up with a balance sheet of the mistakes over the IHRA. That was inspiring. Yeah, there's obviously a real thirst for a party of the left out there. And so far, the Greens are the best ones filling it, but I agree with what Nick said about them not being working class, not being socialist. Zach Polanski says a lot of good things now, and he may have been on a political journey like the former Labour moderate Tony Benn, I don't know, but his background is a bit odd, joining the Lib Dems while they were in coalition with Cameron, being part of the witch hunting of Corbyn over Palestine, where he's got a better position now, in Europe, where he pretty much kept the same position as he had then, witch hunting of Corbyn from the Green Party in those days. So I think if we had your party as a mass split from Labour just become a pipeline to the Greens, in class terms, that would be a very negative thing for the left as a whole. So I think we have to make this work, and that's what I'm trying to do in Scotland. So thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me explain. Finally, I should say I'm the second person to make the 75 bar. I did last night in Scotland, so we'll at least not have a one-horse race. But it is an obviously very, very high bar, especially in areas where the membership's smaller. And anyone in Scotland who wants to hear more seeing this, please get in touch and check out if you've not nominated anyone yet. I'm still accepting nominations, or you might want to let other people get through, though the third one down for me is 30 odd behind, so it might just be this two-horse race.
Thanks very much, Ian.
Yeah, thanks, comrades.
No, thank you, Ian, for your contribution. Congratulations on reaching 75 endorsements. It does seem a pretty pathetic state of affairs, doesn't it, that someone in the Your Party office is spending their time on this, presumably being paid to spend their time on this, but no one is being paid to spend their time on doing things like sending out an email to ensure that an effective local meeting can be advertised. So clearly a lot has to change. Got Pete next. I'll keep an eye on other comrades raising their hands who want to come in.
Hello to everyone. I'm from Birmingham, and it's been absolute chaos here, really, in Your Party. The waiting to get hold of the membership list has led to a situation where we have had a proto-party type supporters group, but we've had so long waiting that that's basically turned in on itself. The SWP are playing a leading role. The supporters group agreed to stand in a by-election in Birmingham, and more by luck than anything else, the candidate who was elected to stand was a member of the SWP. So the SWP are cock a hoop. They absolutely love the situation, and they put everything in, and quite a few people put work into supporting that candidate in the by-election in Birmingham, and she actually got over 900 votes, which was within 200 or 300 of winning the seat. In terms of Birmingham, there hasn't been anyone getting that kind of vote since back in the days of Respect, where there were a few councillors elected against the Labour Party then. So there's potential. There's so much potential, but the way I agree with most of what Nick was saying, the way that the disorganization of your party has been going on, it's just made things really, really difficult, and people falling out with each other. Some people say, well, we have to include all the members, and I think there's an estimate of 3,500 members in Birmingham. And people are saying, well, we're just the usual group of lefties, so what can we do? It's and then you get people coming in and saying, well, you're not a real branch, you've got no authority to do this. It's just been pretty horrendous, really. It's a real shame what's happening, and I don't really know what the way forward is. I think, as Nick was alluding to, the CEC elections may not sort out anything at all. Even if the Grassroots Left won, Corbyn may just ignore it and carry on with his backroom cabinet. That's, as Nick rightly said, that's exactly what happened in Momentum. The left got some traction within Momentum, and John Lansman closed down the national committees and even the regional committees. And, they just kept control of it, even when the left were winning votes. They closed that all down. And I do feel that, well, it does seem that there are some of the same characters who are certainly involved in this backroom committee as were involved in Momentum. And I can just see this happening again. They are not prepared to concede, even though they've said that they would concede a party which is a socialist party, which can be led by the grassroots. They don't mean it. They only want a party that they can control, and it would be quite an ineffectual party. Social democracy is in crisis throughout the world, and the idea that Corbyn can resurrect it now that the Labour Party sold out it's not a project going anywhere. The only hope was that, and I think there are still some signs of hope. I was going to say, in the West Midlands CEC election, there's actually 46 candidates. So this is at least showing that there is still that enthusiasm there, that a lot of people believed what Corbyn said, that it was going to be an open to the rank and file, and have put themselves forward. I've never known that many people put themselves forward before. So there's some signs that something can be done there, but the way it's getting set up, as the sensible grown-ups taking back control and getting rid of the lefties, that's a wholly negative dynamic. I've been involving myself in doing the hustings for the West Midlands, and that's mainly on the basis that all of these independents have put themselves forward, and they're not really got any chance of getting the exposure to get the 75. Obviously, if your party really existed, it would be organising those hustings to allow those people to be heard. So, small kind of intervention to try and assist with that hosting, which is going to be happening tomorrow night. It's already become quite grim, and sort of trying to hold back. The SWP, their candidate in Moseley that got the good vote, she's already declared that she's going to stand, as your party. And it's like, Well, that's just an open goal to the bureaucracy to close that one down. I mean, I'm surprised you got away with it the first time, but in this environment, it's bewildering. It's educated some people, I think. It's educated me a bit. I didn't realize the SWP were quite as stupid, really. They've got a great situation, and they're just going for it. They're just going for that recruitment and then dump it, like they do, I suppose, like they do all the time. But really, really dumb. Anyway, I'll shut up.
No, thank you, Pete. It's good to hear that the SWP exceeded your expectations. So I don't have any comrades on the list to come in to speak. So I'm looking out for anybody who hasn't spoken yet. And of course, as I said at the start, we've got several new people at the meeting, so you're all very welcome. We'd like to hear from you and hear what's going on in your area, or if you have questions about what's being said or want to think out loud and see what the group thinks, that's always welcome as well. So if there's any comrades there want us to come in, by all means, let me know. So I've got John Tumman next. And then Jeff Barr. So go ahead, John.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think that hang on. I think that there's a difficulty here. My connection isn't very good, by the way. Oh dear, what's called now? Anyway, yeah, I think that the main difficulty is in before the conference and during the conference, the socialist left, we became obsessed with process. We became obsessed with dual membership and the attempt to ban people before the conference started. And we never raised the issue of what the politics of the organization were going to be. And that is very important. And it seems that yet again, we're being shunted into talking about process, talking about transparency, democratic internal life, and the absence of those things, and the attempt to crack down on people who are known to be part of the socialist or Marxist left. And we have to fight those battles. We do have to fight those battles, which is why I've been part of the Republican Labour Education Forum petition, which I think I informed some people in TAS about, which is to reinstate all of the people who've been prescribed from standing. I mean, you can't have people who aren't thrown out as members, but have some members who are not allowed to stand and other members who are allowed to stand. That's a two-tier membership. It's wrong in so many ways. It's wrong because there are no criteria agreed or even suggested at any stage as to what a national political organization actually is. But we've also got to, and this was the main point in 3 or 4 of us standing from the Republican Labour Education Forum, we've also got to raise the issue of getting politics on the agenda, because the vacuous political statement of that was agreed at conference and put forward by the interim stewards, as Corbyn describe them, is of no use at all to anybody. It is the absence of political clarity. And what the RLEF is suggesting is that there be a programme commission which goes away and produces a draft for discussion at the conference next year as to what the political values, the political mission, the political campaigning areas, the political priorities should actually be for the organization. And I just, we have to do both of those things. We have to fight for internal democracy and we have to fight for politics as well. And it's very, very difficult when you are under attack or comrades of yours are under attack to not just do one of those. But that's what we have to do. We have to keep our eye on two plates and keep two plates spinning. Okay, thanks.
Thanks very much, John. I've got Jeff next and then Jan.
Yeah, I looked with wild enthusiasm when I saw 800,000 people. I thought even if a lot of them are rather tentative, we have the basis of a serious movement that can challenge the power of capital. Our beloved leadership have managed to cut that down to probably 10,000. We're looking more like one of these rather curious sects on the left. We've seen Scargill and various others run these little parties which essentially trap people. So my question is, if it's finished as a serious movement, what have we gained? In ideas, we've discovered what we already knew in a sense, that the parliamentary left are happy to talk about democracy as long as they're in control, and that they seem to have the power to maintain that control. But we've also gained a lot more. A whole number of us, I look on this group and I know obviously Ed from his time almost getting elected as the MP for Exeter, didn't quite make it as I recall, and Nick from the Socialist Alliance, and Chris because she lives around the corner from me. But I've come into contact with you, with other groups. We have a whole number of linked groups on the left that have met up probably for the first time. And my question is, how do we take that forward? I'm certainly not going to be tracked in some minor sect. I've done that, been there. I've got several T-shirts. And I think that is our key question. John's points are vital. In Devon, we tried to set up an online magazine, but my technological inferiority meant it never happened. But I think we need something that looks rather old-fashioned, a socialist magazine written in language that can be understood, and promoting socialism, not what we saw outside the conference, which I've been reminded me of the old days of Labour conferences of 20-odd magazines held by people who have one thing in common, which is they all hate each other, even though if you looked at the actual substance of the articles, many of them are very, very similar, but each has its own point of faith. So that's the question I pose. How can we take this forward? We certainly can't take it forward under the dictates of our MPs. They have an entirely different agenda, and we have to recognise that. So thanks.
Thanks very much, Jeff. Janet next.
Yeah, thanks. I guess, from what one or two or three people and Richard said in the chat, that there is clearly at some stage going to have to be a very serious discussion about the the role of socialist Marxists in this. I can't even say your party. It fills me with something. Anyway, in this party, I think that I disagree a bit with what Richard's saying in the chat, that if, say, the Corbyn clique don't get a majority, and I'm not sure they will, I think it'll be much messier than that, but who knows? We don't know. If they don't, and there's a majority of, say, some of the grassroots left, some independents on the left, then what do we do then? Is the grassroots left strong enough to fight for what it's actually saying? Not so much in its program, but will they want, what are they going to do? How are they going to do it? And I think, I don't know if Jeff was really saying this, but maybe Nick was, it was an achievement to put that slate together. It was very messy, very difficult. People were coming in and out of it and so on. But given where they started from, it seemed to me, it is an achievement. And it's another achievement that Jeff was talking about, people coming together and so on. And I think that's true. If the Corbyn lot do win a majority, I guess we, as organisations, as Marxists or as individuals, we will make our own minds up about what to do. I mean, I've never been very optimistic about your party, and where I live in Norwich, it's dead anyway. It's not even, if we got 40 people we don't have meetings, but if we had 40 people to a hypothetical meeting, we'd think that was the revolution. So actually, Withenstall, wherever you are, Withen, what is it? Good for you, because that seems to me a lot better, more healthy than some other parts of the country. But I think this would be a red line for me. I don't think I would want to spend what little energy I have in a party that is, as everybody has said, it's social democrat. It will, as Corbyn did and the people around him, it will not just not have socialist policies, it will avoid issues that are too difficult. It will, if they take some of them up, it will then withdraw from them at some stage, because they're clearly focused on electoralism, which is kind of ironic, because they're not going to be fighting any elections in the future, in the next year, probably. So that is a bit ironic. If they got their act together, 2 years ago, a year ago, there would be a candidate in Gorton, there would be candidates in the local elections, but they're not doing that. They're not. But that is clearly their intention. And I think somebody else was saying, I don't know if it's who it was, if it was Pete, that the way they are projecting not just themselves for the elections, these elections, but for the future of the party, it's very clear what that direction is. And I think that's been clarified by the CEC elections. I don't think we've learned very much new, but I think it's been clarified for other people as well, what they actually perceive to be, I wouldn't call it a vision because it isn't, but how they see the positioning of this party compared with other parties. And it's extremely, I think, depressing, even if we didn't have any great ambitions for it to begin with. It seems to me what it will do, they will stifle ideas, they will stifle any space whatsoever for sort of creativity, for vibrancy, for looking not just back at 2017, but they won't look back further, but they certainly won't be looking to the future. They've got this, as we all know, their ultimate is Corbyn 2016, 2017. So, and actually whatever we think about that, they will be heading for a sort of slow, what's the word? I can't think of the word. It's not a slow death, because I don't think they'll die, but irrelevancy. They will become irrelevant. And the Greens are the alternative. I mean, they're a lousy alternative, but they are the alternative, because there will be no way, no difference whatsoever between the Corbyn-led or the Corbyn clique or whatever they call themselves, your party and the Greens, except they have a kind of dynamic leader who can do good videos. I can't see really very much difference. So who is going to lose in that battle? Well, it'll be your party. So I guess I'm very pessimistic, but I'm not entirely pessimistic about the grassroots left or the left if they can have quite a substantial showing on the CEC. I mean, of course, I'm pessimistic about this becoming a Marxist socialist party, but I'm not entirely pessimistic about that, because it seems to me within that group, on the slate and people around them, they're quite young, and that seems to me great, because the rest of us are, some of us are very old, and the rest of you are probably middle-aged or getting older, except Ed. Ian probably, but I mean the world in general is, we all know every meeting we go to, nobody's young, and a lot of those people are young, they're keen, they're enthusiastic, some of them, quite a lot of them are Marxists, and to use the cliche, they are the future. I don't know if they will be able to make much of an impression, but they may do. So I think if there's any chance of this party not becoming, Labour Mark II with Corbyn, then I guess I'd stay, even though it fills me with some horror in some ways. But anyway, that's all.
Thanks very much, Janice. So I've got Soraya to come in, and then there'll be time for maybe one or two very brief contributions if anybody else wants to say a final word before we hand back to Nick to respond to the discussion. So Soraya.
My view is that capitalism does not work. It's no doubt stating the obvious to this audience, but it not only doesn't work, it's destroying the planet and has done murders the working class. And so what do we do now in this situation? I mean, I know forgive me, Ant has posted various things in the chat, but how do you get from here to revolution? It's not that suddenly people are going to en masse reach the conclusions that we need a revolution. It's a process. Yes, it's not necessarily gradual, and there'll be different stages, but my view is, how do you get a dialogue to people who are drawing conclusions that this society does not work, and it may start off, and generally does start off, with somebody's particular individual situation. But if you break it down, people wanting something different are really wanting a different way of organising society. So I don't and haven't had illusions in Corbyn. A lot of us here have had the experience of Corbyn when he was leader of the Labour Party, and before that. He's not a socialist, he's a reformist. Zara Sultana, I didn't really know before this. I don't think she's well, anyway, we will wait and see. But I think what we're seeing is a complete abdication of their political responsibility in Corbyn and Sultana, and a squandering of what is the massive enthusiasm that there was in the figures that we've heard. And what if we think about the numbers that Nick described and how they've diminished, then I think it's not just a question of saying, oh well, they're not very good. It's when I talk about responsibility, I mean it seriously, because people have looked towards your party. They don't want the Labour Party because it's not doing anything to improve their lives. And so your party, the failure of it and the responsibility that Corbyn and Sultana have for this is going to be that more people will turn to reform and those ideas which are completely contrary to the interests of working people and their families. So it's a serious matter. Now, young people have turned towards your party. There's all sorts of discussion and enthusiasm. I I don't think I share with Janet that I don't think, given the way this bureaucracy is trying to stifle initiatives, it won't even let people set up branches, which is just, how do you build a party if you don't allow people to set up branches and you don't give them even the names to equip them to be able to contact people? So I don't think it will be a success. But what do we do as socialists, as revolutionaries? I'm not quite, I couldn't really, I don't really know what Ant is talking about. Nick said quite clearly that we need a revolutionary party and a revolution, and has on repeated occasions in the meetings that Ant has participated. So I don't really understand what Ant is saying in the chat. But it's a question of engaging with people whilst they are around, because the only way we are going to achieve the transformation of society and getting rid of this rotten capitalist system is by the working class taking over. And it's engaging with people to say, well, actually, it isn't enough to have a few tweaks here and there and make capitalism be kinder to people. And yes, we'll control it better than the Tory. You know, the Labour Party is just doing that precisely, isn't it? So it's for me, it's a question of engaging whilst there are people with whom to engage.
Thanks very much, Soraya. And thank you to all comrades who contributed to the discussion. To any of you who didn't want to come in tonight, I hope that you found the discussion enlightening. And clearly, there's a lot there. We've discussed a lot about the wrong way to do everything. Some conclusions that you think would be obvious to everybody, but apparently not yet. But as some comrades, including Jeff, were hinting at, you know, the next step is what do we do to try and get things back on track in some shape or form, and start working towards a real party that actually exists, that intervenes, that isn't afraid of existing just in case the wrong people might end up in charge of things. So that really is the question for us, I think. But I'm going to hand back to Nick now. Nick will have about 15 minutes to respond to the discussion and to offer some further thoughts to develop it. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much, Ed, and thanks to everybody for the contributions, including in the chat. And there's so many issues that arise out of this that we'll have to come back in other discussions. And of course, in discussing the events in your party, we can't ignore, in fact, it's more important in many ways, but what's going on in America and around the world, bringing home even more strongly, more forcefully, the importance of building a real socialist party. And that's what we in TAS are about. However small we are, we want to see the creation of a socialist party, a mass socialist party. By that, and I don't quite understand some of the comments that Ant's put in the chat, although people won't be able to see the chat if they're watching this on YouTube. But we state in our material that we stand for a fundamental break with capitalism. That's another way of saying a revolutionary break with capitalism. We don't believe that capitalism can morph into socialism. It has to be overthrown. It has to be dismantled. The state of the capitalist class, the state of capitalism, has to be destroyed, and a new form of society has to be created based on workers' democracy and eventually the disappearance of classes and the resources of society run, planned, organized by everybody, for the need of everybody. And that's what we stand for. Where we disagree, I think, with perhaps Ant, because I don't know that Ant really ever sets out exactly what we need, apart from saying we need a revolution. But what do we mean by a revolution? It's a movement of the people in society capable of changing society. And in our opinion, that can only be the working class, which is the majority in most of the world. So we stand for the working class majority in every country, and therefore on a global scale, taking power and taking control of the wealth of the world, and using that wealth, the water, the minerals, the skills, the technology, the science, the computing, and so on, for the benefit of all, not to make a profit for the few. That needs a revolutionary transformation. I suppose where we disagree with Ant and perhaps some of the Marxist sects is that the idea that it's never spoken. What do you mean by revolution? It's implicit that there's some sort of insurrectionary assault on 10 Downing Street by a minority. That's how I read much of what I see on the Trotskyist left. I come from that background myself, and Ant's position on the left communist movement. Of course, the working class has to be organized, and it has to be capable of running things, and it needs to learn and train itself how to do that. But that does take place under capitalism. It learns how to run things, it learns the skills and so on. The question is how do we get power? And that's the question of the need for a party. Now, your party was never going to be the party that we campaign for and advocate. As I said right at the very beginning of my introduction, we do not stand for a social democratic party. We do not stand for a Labour Party Mark II. We stand for a party that clearly emblazons on its banner the call for the abolition of capitalism and the creation of the common owner of a society based on the common ownership of the wealth and resources of the world, planned democratically in the interests of all. So it's the mass. And so how do we, as a small group of people that might have differences amongst ourselves as Marxists, how do we take our ideas, those broadly, I'm sure, ideas shared by most of us on the Marxist left, how do we take those ideas? We have to find potentially receptive members of the working class. And that means people who are active in the trade unions, in working class struggles, in tenants' movements, in the anti-genocide campaigns. And we have to try to take our ideas and explain them and link what people are campaigning against, what they're opposing, with the vision of a new society when these things would have been consigned to the dustbin of history along with capitalism. It's capitalism that creates wars through competition. It's capitalism that creates climate catastrophe through the drive for profit and ignoring the consequences. So we need, if we want to change the conditions of the working class, we have to get rid of the present system. Now, in your party, I'll be blunt, the reason for Marxists to be in your party is because there's an audience, a receptive audience for the ideas of socialism. And I don't mean for the ideas of social democracy. They're already there in Corbyn, although he's less and less a social democrat than Tony Benn and others like him ever were. It's because of the fact that he's put out a call, or he and Sultan have put out a call, and people responded, showing the interest, showing the thirst. Well, how do we confront the rise of the far right? How do we confront the assaults on migration and so on? If you look at America at the moment, what's going on in Minnesota, and the response of the working class in Minnesota to ICE, a remarkable response with people organizing themselves, showing what's possible. But if that organization, that working class organization, is to go anywhere rather than be dissipated, even if it's victorious in driving out ICE, the question is, well, what does that, where do those lessons learned go? What we need is, in my opinion, we need a party in which those people can be organized and discuss, how do we confront the state? How do we dismantle it? How do we come to power? What do we do when we come to power? And of course, there are all sorts of ideas in your party, and including in the Grassroots Slate program, that there'll be disagreement about. But we have an opportunity to engage in that. Coming back to in your party and where's this all going, it may well be that the dead hand of the bureaucracy and the social democratic obstruction is such that actually whoever wins, there's no coming back. I don't know. We have to wait and see. And I find it quite difficult, actually, because I mentioned about this meeting that we had in Withington, and people were clearly disappointed at that meeting that we didn't have enough to form a formal branch. We needed 60 people there. We got 45. We didn't have enough to form a branch, and you could sense there's a frustration and a disappointment. And how do you approach that? You want to give ideas about the political program that's necessary, and I hope that when Saraya and I intervened in that meeting and spoke, we gave a socialist vision, the idea of abolishing capitalism. But we also don't want people to give up the fight and go into despondency and sort of walk away into, well, what, reading or just in single issue campaigns. So we have to sort of assess with others on the left and discussing with others on the Marxist left. We have to discuss where your party is and draw conclusions. And it may be that we have to, I suppose, say, well, it's not worth the effort. Or, yes, it is still worth the effort because there's something to be gained from it. So that's an ongoing discussion. And there's some good ideas that have come out. I mean, Jeff's idea about how do we collaborate in producing socialist material. I would encourage people to send material into the TAS website whilst that discussion perhaps develops some legs. So there are things that we can do. These discussions are part of it, even if they're inadequate and they don't have the reach that we would like. We hope that people enjoy these discussions. It's good to get new people coming, and we hope it was really good to hear from Pete in Birmingham, and I hope that the others who have come to their first meeting will come back, where we'll have to discuss, or we will be discussing, some of the international events and the question of war, the question of the rise of the far right and fascism. I think myself, I'll just say in passing, I think people are underestimating the rise of the fascist state in America, and as we see in Minnesota. But these are discussions that we have to have. They're very, very important. I'm just going to finish on this because I think all of you, most of you, and those watching will know that in talking about socialism, last year we embarked on a discussion with the CPGB about forging communist unity. Well, that wasn't a success, and we pulled out for reasons I'm not going to go into now. It's on the website. We still believe in that. We still think that is necessary, to have communists, Marxists, socialists in the way that Marx and Engels talked about socialism, coming together to discuss how best to advance the ideas of socialism stroke communism. And we want to work with others in discussing that and working out how we can bring people together or come together. And it may be that the Grassroots Left slate has shown that there's a possibility for some small organizations to work together. I don't know about the bigger ones. They always retreat into what they know best, which is their own island of organization. And so we hope that you come back. Please engage with us on our website and on our Facebook page. And if you want to write something, please consider writing an article or just post comments on the website. And I'll leave it at that. And see you all in a month's time, I hope. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick, and thanks to all comrades. So I hope that you've all registered for our series of Zooms. And the next one we have is on the 23rd of February. But of course, we'll send out a proper email sometime before then, where we'll announce the topic, and hope to see you all there. Thanks very much. Have a good evening.